Hello, I'm Reverend Ruth Van Lillian. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Emerald Coast. We are a covenantal community founded on loving kindness and a common devotion to our free faith. We recognize all the earth as sacred ground, and we welcome each other into this virtual space. We especially welcome those visiting with us today. We are so glad you're here. We invite you to check out our website and our Facebook page to learn more about us. We hope to touch hearts, teach minds, challenge spirits, and comfort souls. May you find refreshment and restoration in our service today.
Hello, I'm Charlene Farley and a member of this fellowship. Before we continue with our service today, UUFEC has two exciting announcements. First, on April the 17th, Easter Sunday, we will be together again when UUFEC holds our first in-person service in 2 years. So grab your mask and your Easter bonnet and join us that day. Second, you can help UUFEC thrive as we make this big transition. It is time for our annual canvas. This year's theme is Together Again. Members will receive a pledge form in the mail sometime the week of March the 7th with a letter about more exciting projects to enrich our programs and to spiffy up the building. Please return the form back to UUFEC by April 1st or sooner if you're able. Please be as generous as you can. Better yet, you can get all this information you need on UUFEC's Donate page shown on the screen. Contact Jane Park, President at UUFEC.com, or Denny Lauer, Canvas Chair at UUFEC.com with any questions. And now, we thank you for your attention, and we continue with our chalice lighting. Symbol of light and knowledge, symbol of warmth and freedom, we light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love.
Good morning. This is the time of year when we think about our pledges for the coming year and how we're going to support our fellowship to keep it going and thriving. So I found a story about giving. It's called The Quilt Maker's Gift. It has absolutely gorgeous illustrations. And it's a little bit long, so I will shorten it somewhat. You might want to look it up for yourself to get all the rest. Here we go. Let me show you this first picture. It is so beautiful. There she is. There was once a quilt maker who lived in a house high up in the blue misty mountains. Here and there, and wherever the sun warmed the earth, it was said she made the prettiest quilts anyone had ever seen. The blues seemed to come from the deepest part of the ocean, the whites from the northernmost snows, the greens and purples from the abundant wildflowers, the red, oranges, and pinks from the most wonderful sunsets. Some said there was magic in her fingers. Some whispered her needles and cloth were gifts of the bewitched. And still others said the quilts really fell to earth from the shoulders of passing angels. Many people climbed her mountain, pockets bursting with gold, hoping to buy one of her wonderful quilts. Those rich folks, but she wouldn't sell to any of them. I give my quilts to those who are poor or homeless, she told them. They are not for the rich. So she doesn't ever sell one, she just gives them away. On the coldest and darkest nights, the woman would make her way down the mountain to the village below. She would look for those who didn't have homes, who didn't have warm things, and give them a quilt. Then the very next morning, with a steaming cup of blackberry tea, she would begin a new quilt. Well, you know what happens when there's somebody like that. There's always someone greedy in the story who wants what she's got. And this is no different. At this time, there lived a powerful and greedy king who liked nothing better than getting presents. He had people from all over his kingdom bringing him presents all the time. He even had 2 birthdays every year, so he would get more. And he got so much, he was just stashing them everywhere until he had no more room, but he still wanted more. And no matter how much he got, it didn't make him happy. So then one day he heard about the quilt maker with something he didn't own yet. So he ordered his soldiers to march up to her house to get him one of those quilts. She only makes them for the poor, Your Majesty, the soldier replied. She will not sell them for any amount of money. We shall see about that, the king roared. Bring me a horse and 1,000 soldiers. So they set off in search of the quilt maker. When they arrived at her house, though, she just laughed. My quilts are for the poor and needy. I can easily see you are not either. I want one of those quilts, the king demanded. It might be the one thing that will finally make me happy. The woman thought about that for a moment. Make gifts of everything you own, she said, and then I'll make a quilt for you. With each gift you give, I'll sew in another piece. When at last all your things are gone, your quilt will be finished. Give away all my wonderful treasures, cried the king. I don't give things away. I take them. And with that, he ordered his soldiers to seize the beautiful star quilt from the quilt maker. But when they rushed upon her, she threw it out into the wind. It floated away. Well, that made the king very angry. He captured her. He marched her up and down the streets of town, and then he finally tied her up with iron chains in the cave of a sleeping bear. When this bear awakens, he said, I'm sure he will make a very fine breakfast of you. Later, when the bear's eyes opened and he saw the woman in his cave, he gave a giant roar. Oh, it's no wonder you're so grouchy, the quilt maker said. You've nothing but rocks to lay your head on. Bring me an armful of pine needles, and with my shawl, I'll make you a great big pillow. So that's what she did, using her own shawl. And now he's so comfy. No one had ever been that kind to him before. So he broke her iron chains and asked her to spend the night. Well, now the king, although he's very good at being greedy, he was not very good at being mean. All night he couldn't sleep thinking about that poor woman locked in the cave. Oh my, what have I done? He wailed. So he woke up his pajamas and marched them in their pajamas. up to save the quilt maker. But when they arrived, they found the two of them having breakfast, berries and honey. Well, now the king's madder than ever. He completely forgot about feeling sorry for her. And he thought of another way to force her to give him a quilt. He had his soldiers build an island so tiny she could only stand on it on tiptoe. And there they left her. They got her out there, this way. When you fall asleep, he said, you are going to fall into the ocean and drown. But it was so cold and windy, a little sparrow came by. It landed on her shoulder for a moment, and she saw how cold he was. She took her own vest and made him a little purple jacket. Well, he flew away, but he didn't forget her. He came back with all of his friends. They lifted her up and off that island and carried her safely to shore. Well, again, that night, the king was feeling kind of bad about what he had done. Oh my, what have I done? He moaned. So he woke up his sleepy soldiers and marched them in the pajamas down to the lake to set the woman free. But when they arrived, she was sitting on a tree limb sewing tiny purple coats for all the sparrows. You can imagine he's getting madder than ever. What must I do for you to make me a quilt? And she reminded him what she'd said before. He has to give away all of his stuff first. I can't do that, cried the king. I love my beautiful, wonderful things. But if they don't make you happy, what good are they? The woman said. That's true. All right, I'm going to try it. So he looked all over his castle for anything that he wanted to give away, because he really liked all of his stuff. He finally decided on a marble. But when he gave it to a little boy out in the town, the boy smiled so brightly in return. The king went back to try something else. Eventually, he found out a pile of velvet coats and went all around the town giving those away. And it made everyone so happy. But he still didn't smile. He fetched 100 waltzing blue Siamese cats and a dozen fish that were clear as glass. He took out, look at all this stuff he's bringing. He brought out his very own merry-go-round with real live horses and let all the kids in town play. Just the smallest of smiles began to show on his face. They're all having so much fun. The king looked around him and saw the dancing and merrymaking and all the happiness his gifts were bringing. How can this be? He said. How can I feel so happy about giving my things away? Bring everything out. Bring it all out at once. And the quilt maker kept her word and began sewing one piece at a time onto his quilt. The king kept on giving and giving. When he had given things to everyone in town, he started traveling the whole world, giving things away. Each time, he would send a sparrow back to let the old woman know so she could put one more piece in his quilt. These wonderful pictures of all the places all over the world he's going and giving things away. The quilt became more and more beautiful. Finally, one day, a weary sparrow flew to her window and perched on her needle. She knew then it was the last messenger, so she put a final stitch in the quilt and started down the mountain in search of the king. She finally found him. His royal clothes were now in tatters and his toes poked out of his boots. But his eyes glittered with joy and his laugh was wonderful and thunderous. The quilt maker unfolded his quilt from her bag. It was so beautiful, hummingbirds and butterflies fluttered about. She wrapped it tenderly about him. What's this? Cried the king. As I promised you long ago, she said, when the day came that you yourself were poor, then would I give you a quilt. But I'm not poor, he said. I may look poor, but in truth, my heart is full to bursting, filled with the memories of all the happiness I've given and received. I'm the richest man I know. Nevertheless, she said, I made it just for you. Thank you, he replied. I'll take it, but only if you accept one gift from me. There's one last thing I've saved for you. After all these years, I've been waiting. And from his rickety rundown wagon, the king brought out his throne. It's very comfortable, he said, just the thing for long days of sewing. So from that day on, the king often came to the quiltmaker's house in the clouds. She would sew all day, and at night the king would take them down to the town. He would search out the poor and downhearted, never happier than when he was giving something away. Well, I know we're not actually going to give away everything we own, and no one would expect us to. But it is true that when we give of ourselves, that's what makes us happy. The person who receives is happy, and we are as well. So be generous, find ways to share what you have with others. Thanks for listening. Bye.
For all that is alive, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use, to build the common good, and make our own days glad. For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. Friends, as we consider the concerns and the celebrations of our community, let us spend a few moments in silence, and I will close us with some words by Emily Dickinson. If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin unto his nest again, I shall not live in vain. Amen. Shalom. Blessed be.
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and by this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and by this we live.
Thank you for continuing to send in your pledge or other donations, either by mail or on our website, UUFEC.com. In March, our Share the Plate donations will be split with Healing Paws for Warriors. This group is committed to providing our heroes the tools to live as they struggle with PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and other debilitating conditions. Their goal is to increase veterans' self-esteem, allow them to lead a more productive life, and help alleviate some of their symptoms. By training rescue or shelter dogs, they allow the veteran to receive a service dog at no cost. They could potentially save 2 lives in the process, the veteran and the dog. Thank you for your generosity.
Sometime during my first year at my first church, I had a realization about preaching. I really had nothing new to say to my parishioners. For most of them, I was not telling them anything that they had not heard before. Most of them had attended church for years, had been taught the Christian Bible, and had a fair idea of the basic teachings of their faith. As a Methodist minister then, my job was to stand in the pulpit every Sunday and find a new, fresh, interesting way to tell them things they really already knew. My role was to remind them of the truths they already believed in and to challenge them to live out of those truths more faithfully. As a Unitarian Universalist minister, it seems like this is still often the case, though they have expanded and are expressed somewhat differently. The basic truths are unchanged. Our 2022 pledge campaign is about to begin. You will soon receive stewardship materials to review, consider, and follow in order to make your annual financial pledge to support the ministries of this fellowship. All Unitarian Universalist congregations are self-supporting, and every member is expected to make and fulfill a financial commitment every year. See, here I am, telling you something you already know. Why should I do that? Why do we need to have a canvas campaign at all? When people join our fellowship, they are told that pledging is part of the membership commitment. Why do we need to go to the trouble of holding a campaign to get the pledges in every year? I attended a webinar on stewardship last year held by the UUA, and in a breakout room on Zoom, I talked with a lovely fellow from a fellowship up north, and he told me they were preparing for their second stewardship campaign ever. His congregation is about 25 years old, and they had just had their first campaign in 2020. Prior to that, they had just informally reminded everyone, occasionally, to please support the budget. I asked him how the income compared from the informal approach to their first campaign. He laughed and said that the stewardship campaign yielded the most pledged and paid income by far. It was the first year they had made their budget and been in the black in over a decade. Why do we need a stewardship campaign? Why don't folk just give generously without being asked? Well, to start with, most of us have not been taught to be joyful, generous givers. Our middle-class history promotes frugality as a virtue. And even among those of us who are lifelong givers, there are some who feel held back from giving by a fear of not having enough. Learning to share, cultivating fearless generosity is a spiritual practice. And like all such, if we practice doing the practice of generosity, it gets easier, and our enthusiasm for it increases. Why do I, as your minister, need to remind you of what you already know? Well, the same reason I need reminding also. There is much to distract us, to pull our attention away from the things that really matter. Many of you know that I made a financial pledge to this fellowship when I began serving last August. I actually pledged for the whole fiscal year, meaning I went back to before when I started. I paid my pledge monthly, and I keep current most of the time. Yes, I know this is very personal information, and I am your minister. And one of my roles is to set the example for the members of the fellowship. I don't ask any of you to do anything I am not happy to do myself. I ask you to support the ministries of this church because I value them. I believe so much in the work and the potential of this fellowship, and its potential to make a difference on the Panhandle, that I am happy to give of my own financial resources to support it. Where does stewardship fit in with mission and ministry? It's the grease to the wheels. No stewardship means no commitment, no volunteers, no money, no effort, no nothing. No stewardship means no mission and no ministry. No stewardship means no congregation. Effective stewardship is the foundation of a healthy fellowship. Stewardship will give us the resources to invite, inspire, and involve members, friends, guests, and visitors to live out the UU principles and create the ministry which will transform our corner of the world. Let's start with how we invite folk into this community and its ministry. Stewardship will determine the nature and efficacy of that invitation. It will depend on the number of members who recommit to their membership vows of promising to give of their time, their talent, and their treasure. The strength and effectiveness of our invitation will depend on who gives these things and how generous they are. Do we need to improve our website with brighter colors, better pictures, animation, music, dancing dogs, and trapeze artists? Depends on stewardship. Does our Facebook page need a facelift? Do we need to up our game with our YouTube channel? Do we need to get our fellowship on Instagram, Twitter, and Discord? Do we need billboards and banners, radio time, other advertising? Is it time for us to get out into the community more and offer the invitation in new ways instead of just waiting for all those closeted liberals to find us? Could we start a small group ministry in another location? Could we find ways to reach military personnel? What justice cause could we focus our efforts on? I personally like the idea of a Unitarian Universalist vehicle in the spirit of the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. What would that look like? Something chalice-shaped, with Black Lives Matter banners and rainbow flags trailing behind. Would we play UU hymn tunes and stop at the corners to offer free coffee and hummus? Could we rent a parking space at the beach and have evangelistic vegan tailgating parties during the tourist season? And when they arrive or encounter us in some other setting, will they find the welcoming community they were promised? Is our Sunday worship service inclusive? Did we consider whether hymns were respectful of Black, Indigenous, and other persons of color, or of disabled persons, or of transgender or gender non-binary persons? What about readings, printed materials, the sermon or presentation? Are the chairs arranged so that folk with mobility issues can maneuver comfortably? What about COVID protocols? Can everyone hear well? Are the building spaces clean and aesthetically pleasing and in good repair? Well, we know they're clean. We've done a lot of cleaning. Are the children's classrooms ready to receive the children? What about the playground? Is the parking lot in good shape? Is signage high quality, easy to read, attractive? The answer to all these questions depends on stewardship. If you, members and friends of this congregation, give generously of your time, your effort, and your financial resources, you will be able to address these concerns and make the invitation very appealing indeed. And how shall we inspire folk? Will those who respond to the invitation find inspiration in our fellowship? What does stewardship have to do with inspiration? Richard was an older dad of a young, only child. When I knew him, he was bringing little Nicholas to church on his own and allowing his wife a rare morning to herself on Sundays. Rich wanted his boy to enjoy the benefits of socializing with other little kids, and he was more than a bit intrigued by the theological and spiritual freedom of Unitarian Universalism. He told me he had not thought about the big questions for many years until Nicholas came along. Suddenly he found himself wondering again about things like where we come from and what is the source of the universe. Becoming a father in his 40s had pushed him way out of his comfort zone in many levels, and he found himself doubting his own integrity, his spiritual authenticity. He said he needed somewhere safe and receptive to bring his questions, where no one would force answers on him, but where others would question alongside him and share their ideas while listening respectfully to his. "You really can't put a price on that, preacher," he said to me as he turned in his pledge card, "but I have tried to come up with a figure which expresses how grateful I am to have this church in my life. A year ago I would never have imagined giving so generously to a congregation, but now I see that I can't live without it. And I know there must be a lot more people like me that need what this church is offering." Are you inspired in your own spiritual journey in this fellowship? How much is it worth to you to provide the same inspiration to other religious liberals in the larger community? Faithful Stewardship will launch a new season of much-needed inspiration for those already at home in our fellowship and for the religious liberals in our area who haven't found us yet and think they are alone. Once we have invited and inspired, how do we involve everyone in ministry, which brings meaning to our lives and equips us to help build a more just and compassionate world? You guessed it, it's all connected to stewardship. Some years ago, I officiated at the wedding of a lovely young couple, Christy and Ben. Not long after they were married, Ben was diagnosed with an aggressive form of brain cancer, and just after their first anniversary, he died. The Stewardship Committee felt it would be pushy and unfeeling to expect her to pledge just a couple of months after such a loss, and they decided to leave her off of the stewardship list. When the stewardship campaign ended, she came to see me, and she was very distraught. Why had she been left out? Didn't her membership still count? Didn't she still have a place in the church? When she was trying to get back on her feet as a single person again after such heartbreak, she felt betrayed by her church community. Didn't they know she was still committed to the mission? Did they think she was incapable of pledging just because her husband had died? I immediately retrieved a spare stewardship packet, and I placed it in her hands with my deepest apologies. She was absolutely right. We had no right to take away her opportunity to participate in such a vital part of church life. We were wrong to deny her the chance to practice generosity, to support a cause she so believed in, the mission of her congregation. I was inspired by her courageous demand for her right to be involved through stewardship in making the world a better place. Stewardship is not just a part of that involvement. Stewardship is at the core of our involvement in the fellowship's mission. When we commit our time, our skill and effort, and our financial resources to support the mission, we are involved. If a member is not participating in stewardship, they are not really involved in building a just and compassionate world. Stewardship is a part of the covenantal relationship we all share. To see stewardship as merely a necessary burden we must endure, or a bill that must be paid, is to do a great disservice to the covenantal nature of our church community. When we join the congregation and sign the membership book, virtually or in person, we make a promise to one another to support the ministry that we do together with every resource at our disposal. We don't pledge to the board of trustees or the finance committee. We don't pledge to the minister. We don't pledge to the UUA. We pledge to each other. Certainly, we will not all be able to give the same amount, but we can all give generously from what we have. We entrust our resources to one another to make our mission happen here and now. And don't you come complaining to me that you give so much to other charities you just don't have much left to give to the church. I support several charities too, but my congregation is at the top of the list. In fact, it's not even on the same list. This fellowship is not a charity. It's our community, our tribe, our family of choice. Make it your giving priority. And give the lion's share of your financial donations to your fellowship. Will the Audubon Society visit you in the hospital? Will Save the Children bring you a casserole when you're sick? Will the Humane Society provide pastoral services when you are in crisis, marry and bury your loved ones? Will any of your favorite charities offer you tangible friendship, equip you to do justice work, and provide real help in time of need? No, not likely. These are things that a community of faith does. Your community of faith is all these things to you and more. Why wouldn't you want to be generous and give as much support as possible to your fellowship? It's time to recommit ourselves to our membership covenant. It's time to recommit ourselves to this fellowship's mission. It's time to recommit our time, our skills, effort, and our financial resources to support that mission. There's a new season coming, and so much promise in our future. So much to look forward to, and so many ministry opportunities. Stewardship is the energy supply for everything we do and everything we hope to do. Let's practice generosity. Let's get those pledge cards in. Let's invite, inspire, and involve everyone in the life and ministry of our amazing Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Amen. Shalom. Blessed be. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love.
We leave blessed by our connections to one another, to the spirit of life. Walk gently, that you see the life that is below your feet. Spread your arms as if you had wings and could dance through the air. Feel the joy of the breath in your lungs and the fire in your heart. Live to love and be a blessing on this earth.
Siblings and kindred, it is time to invite, to inspire, to involve everyone. Stewardship is the foundation of all that we do here. Let us practice generosity with joy and enthusiasm. Let us go in peace. Amen. Shalom. Blessed be.